Hey, everybody. It's May of 2022, depending on when you're listening to this. Every May, they take time to acknowledge foster parents, family members, volunteers, mentors, policymakers, child welfare professionals, and other members of the community who help children and youth in foster care find permanent homes and connections. Now, that's what the Children's Bureau has to say on their website, and I think really what we can do is to just go out and help raise some awareness. That's part of our mission here at Foster Care Nation, is we're raising the awareness of the need for people to help kids. There's almost 500,000 children in the youth and foster care systems, and we want to celebrate those who make a meaningful difference in their lives. So to all the foster care parents out there, if you're a foster parent, yeah, we think you're awesome. Now, if you're not a foster parent, that's okay. Share some of these episodes with people, because the initiatives that we work with and some of the people who just have a story to tell, to let us know what this is really like, why some of the people we know have the struggles that they have. This is our job in life. It's just to help others, especially when it comes to children. We are passionate about helping kids understand how to work through these hard things. So share this with somebody, send them an episode. This month, we're going to have a couple amazing guests on here. We're going to start the month out with Rita Sornan. Rita is the CEO and president of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. We got a couple other great things coming up this month, so keep your eyes open. And again, share this with somebody. That'll be one of the biggest things that you can do to help raise awareness of the need that is just absolutely overwhelming the kids in our nation right now. You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Training.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. I'm recording, buddy. I thought about it. No. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason and no Amanda. Sorry guys, but she is out doing all those mom things where she takes care of kids who have to have appointments and whatnot, and my silly self went and scheduled something in the middle of one of those appointments. So I don't claim to be smart, but we're getting kids taken care of today. So today you just get me, and our guest today is Miss Veronica Bratcher. She is a podcaster and author and a therapist and a foster mom who sounds entirely insane to me. So it's great to have you here today, Veronica. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing wonderful. Okay, so this whole author, you said you have a book coming out in May, right? So depending on when you listen to this, that would be May of 2022. So that's right around the corner. And the title is Missing Pieces Matter, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about that, the title. I'm just curious. What is that about?
I, as a therapist and a survivor of grief, I live in a world where there's a lot of grief that happen from foster kids that you don't get to stay with to, in my experience, I had a daughter who passed away, an adoptive daughter that passed away. And I work a lot with trauma and grief. And it talks about how as a culture, we have a tendency to compare our grief. Whose is bigger, whose is worse. And in doing so, we create a lot of pain in ourselves and in each other. And so it describes how we learned it, and it describes how we can do it better.
We have some real similar stories. I don't know if you have heard our story, but our oldest daughter was not our biological daughter. She was my wife's half sister. They shared a mom, and their mom was she still has her addiction struggles. The last time I'd heard, I don't know really where she's at in her life right now, but because of those struggles, her daughter came to stay in our house for a good long time, and several years. And she called me dad, and she called my wife mom. up until we lost her to a nasty disease as well. And Arissa was more or less not legally adopted child. You know, she lived in my house. We bought her food and clothes and took care of all the things that parents take care of. And I think you're right. People do tend to compare things like that, and they go, well, you know, it wasn't your real daughter, but at the same time, man, I think you'd have a hard time convincing us of that. And I imagine that's probably something that's true in your own story as well.
Absolutely. And there's so much guilt, whether it's a biological child or an adoptive child or not formally adopted child, about, the normal parental guilt of, we are here to keep our kiddos safe. And the world is a messy place sometimes. But there's a lot of loss from other people saying no, and then the hurry up and get over it, and aren't you better now? And then when you get better, you kind of get this, well, you're not supposed to be better. Isn't this supposed to like plague you forever? And aren't you supposed to be perpetually broken? And what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
There's no winning.
Yeah. And hey, you have all these other kids. Can't you be thankful that you have all these other kids instead of just focusing on this one that you lost?
That's right. Pick a kid you don't like and say you can't have them anymore, and then don't miss them because you're just going to, get a new puppy.
Yeah. That is a wonderful way to put it. A wonderful way. Yeah. It took a therapist of my own to realize that part of my struggle was the fact that as a dad, my job is to protect my kids. And I was really, I think, upset with myself that I could not cure hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. And as it turns out, they had to fly a team of specialists into the St. Louis Children's Hospital out of Johns Hopkins just to be able to diagnose the disease because it's so rare. I don't think I was supposed to be able to take care of that one.
I don't think you were.
It sure felt that way. It sure felt that way for us. So yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about on the grief part, because that was super hard for us. We still deal with it. In many ways, I'm certain that we may or may not really show a lot of times, but it's still part of our story and part of our journey. So, you've got like the full gamut of things in your life here, you also happen to have your podcast. What is it? Grief and, what was the name of your podcast again? I think I wrote it in the wrong place.
The Complicated Adult.
That's what it is. I wrote that in the wrong place because I'm smart like that. The Complicated Adult. I know you said you just got started. You're still working on that. I'll be happy to make sure we throw a link in the show notes, because God only knows when someone is going to listen to this episode. And so when you hear it, go out and see if it's really taken off yet, because I know you're just in the beginning stages right now, right?
That's right. We're focusing. It's a lot of stories from the therapy room. And I'm a therapist, and I share a lot of the same stories and experiences over and over. From a lot of them are grief and trauma stories and skills. Obviously 100% of confidentiality is protected, but the skills and some of the patterns in the stories are the same from day to day. And one of the reasons when I wanted to, in writing the book and then starting the podcast, was a lot of people are, why didn't I know this already? Why couldn't I find this? Why didn't I hear this before? And I'm like, well, I could record it, and that way when people are interested and wanting to listen to it, it's available.
There you go. Well, and let's be real honest. For most of us, who went through a lot of this hard stuff 10, 15, even 20 years ago, it was not that findable. The information just wasn't out there yet at this point.
No, it wasn't. And we were just, we very much come from the generation of the bootstraps, pull it up, suck it up, rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really helped our mental health in the big long run of generations.
No, it has not. And then when you say that to your kids, I have a lot of boys in my house, and they'll take that a little too literally, and they'll come in covered in dirt. And I have one that keeps coming in, and I think he's found out how to get under the front porch. And when he comes into the front door there, we have just like a little foyer area, and it has this perpetual pile of dirt and dust that just, I'm pretty certain that's where he comes in and shakes off like a dog. He may be part mole, just digging underground. I don't know. We haven't lost him yet. So as long as he comes back, I don't fuss at him too much.
Hey, you'll have secret paths out in the yard. You just have to watch where you walk. Otherwise you might step and go halfway to China.
Hey, as long as he's finding buried treasure, we'll be okay.
That's right.
Now, you said you're also a worker with Children's Protective Services, right?
I was, before I went into clinical work, I spent about 10 years working with foster care and child protective services. That was my first step into, you know, outside of my upbringing, family life, and into the life of foster care.
What took you into that job, especially for how long did you say you did that job? 10 years?
I was in there for about 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. I know a lot of caseworkers. We've been doing this in our area for almost a decade and a half now. And I think if I was to count them all, we probably had 6,000 different caseworkers come through.
Yep.
It is a high turnover job. How the heck did you survive for a decade in that?
Stubbornness is probably one of the most well-known traits I could share. Part of it is moving with some different teams and working a little bit differently. But a big part of it was stubbornness of, I got to do this better, and I got to do this, and I got to figure out this. And it's one of the very reasons why I burned out and went on to clinical work, where I could not just juggle the families and the kiddos I was trying to help, but try to help on the back end, because I thought we could do better.
And I imagine as a therapist, you have a lot more time to build relationships with these kids and really feel like you have more time to help a kid.
Absolutely. And what I mean, I love helping kids. I'm actually opening up totally separately a residential treatment center for post-adoption kids, because, you know, I'm bored. I have 8 kids. Why would I not do anything else? But I have another partner that we're opening up a residential treatment center for post-adoptive kiddos so that we can focus on that. And I love helping kids. But what I have found is that as much as helping kids is great, so much of it is figuring out how to help their parents, whether it be their biological parents or their foster parents or their adoptive parents, because some of the stuff that kids struggle with is not going to be, I hate using the word fixable, but I'm going to say fixable in the time frame that we want it to be. And so some of it is, how, as a person caring for these kiddos, do you survive how do you survive their trauma? And so I do a lot of work with adults and parents because that can be really triggering for the adults. And it brings up a lot of our issues, especially when we have kids that are struggling and we go, I'm really failing at this parenting thing because my kid is doing this. And then we get frustrated and tense and crabby, and we are even less of the parent that we want to be.
Amen. Yeah, because I can only imagine, just speaking from personal experience here, that a lot of the things that you see, that these struggles that parents really struggle with, have a lot to do with the fact that these kids come into this situation with their own traumas, their own struggles, and then these kids have got us here who have our own traumas and struggles from our own childhood that may have never even been addressed or dealt with. And we're kind of like mixing our buckets of trauma together and seeing what kind of witch's brew we can come up with to live in.
Yeah. And I mean, because in my work, when we work on trauma and things like that, people think it doesn't count as trauma if it's not some big old child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, war. And while those things all 100% count as trauma, it is so much more intricate than that. One of the treatment methods I use is EMDR. And when they talked about the redefined trauma, that it is what changes our brain and what changes our body is so much more the little stuff. And so I redefine trauma for myself and my clients, that I said, if it changes the way you see yourself or the way you see the world, it counts as a trauma.
Trauma is one of those buzzwords that's been really popular over the last, 5 to 10 years, maybe. But before that, you're right. People would only have attributed that to something like, the big traumas. Other than that, you just needed to, like you said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get over it. Let's go. You just got to do it. It's time to go white knuckle this. And we didn't have a lot of space to deal with that stuff. And I think as adults, something in our generation that we've seen that turn into is a lot of people who think that, well, if you can't fix it, then I'm just going to fix it for you. And I'm going to make you all better, because we think we can just bootstrap it through that. And I don't have the clinical degree, so I can't say this with 100% certainty according to what science says, but I'm thinking that's a whole lot of BS. You can't do that.
Oh, it's a whole lot of BS. Ask my beautiful herd of children, and they will tell you mom does not have it all figured out. And I'm sure there are times that I have, as probably most adoptive parents for one time or another, have been called the worst mom ever.
No, I'm
And
sorry. That one resides in our house. We have the award for the worst mom ever in our house and the worst dad. So yeah.
yeah, we're given those turn out, and it doesn't matter my clinical expertise, my social work expertise. I am still the mom that turns off the Wi-Fi and grounds them from their friend's house and tells them they have to shower and do their laundry and clean their room. And I couldn't be doing it more wrong sometimes.
That is abuse, don't you know? I have this really nifty app on my phone that controls the Wi-Fi from wherever I'm at.
Amen. We have it too.
I can be 500 miles away on the phone with a kid who's acting a fool, and all it takes is a push of a couple buttons, and the attitude changes completely.
It is the superpower, isn't it? To be able,
Yes.
it is the life and death force in our house. My husband and I will go out to dinner. We'll get the phone call that they're arguing over what to watch on TV. We turn off the Wi-Fi and the TV. Whew. Air out of their sails.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who abuses my kids with Wi-Fi.
No, it's the 2000 generation of parenting. We aren't taking away your this and that and the other. We're taking away your Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty certain that Wi-Fi is part of what allows kids to be able to live. So, we're taking away a basic need, and that's okay. I think that one's okay.
That's right.
The last part that we haven't really, you've alluded to it a little bit, we haven't talked about it a whole lot, is that not only do you have all these different titles in your life, but, you managed to pull all that off with a couple kids in your house.
I do. I have 8 children. Currently, I only have 6 in my house, but I have 8 kids. I have one off at college, and then I have one of my my other biological son is he's decided he wanted to play only child, and so he's living in Colorado with his dad versus with our herd of children. So we have 6 kids in the house now since my oldest went off to college.
Ah, okay. Yeah, we had our daughter that we lost, and our oldest 2 sons have gone off to go be grown-ups because they're 21 and 23 years old. And then one of our other kids is staying with a biological aunt right now. So we're down to 4 kids in the house. And you would never think in a million years that down to 4 kids would sound peaceful.
Oh, I look forward to the down to 4. My husband and I are looking forward to our next 2, because we're half teenagers. And then through sibling groups and adoption, we now have, my oldest is almost 19. But my youngest are 5 and 6 now with the sibling group adoption. So we were almost to the end of the gate, and then we started over because, we're dumb that way. But when we think of our next 2 kids coming through, my oldest adoptive son is 16. And then my stepson and my adoptive daughter are both 15. And so we think in 3 years, we'll be down to 3 kids. And it just seems like paradise vacation every day to be down to be in the final steps of maybe down to 3 kids.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm going to warn you. There's a snare in that. Quite a few years back, at 41 years old, my youngest kid was going to be graduating high school, and we were going to be early empty nesters. We have money to spare and go travel and see the world, whatever we wanted to do. We didn't have to take care of kids. And then something happened along the way, and I turned 41 about 3.5 years ago. And I'm just going to suggest that I've got a lot longer to go than that, because right now the youngest one in our herd is 6. He's about to turn 7 actually next month. And okay, I'm thinking, all right, well, that's another 11 years. I'll be 56 when he's ready to go to high school or leave high school. And okay, well, we won't be early empty nesters, but by that point we'll be able to start thinking about like retirement coming up. And right now we have a little one staying with us, and her story's not written yet, but if it goes long term, like it kind of looks like it may. Now I'm staring down something more like 62.
Those are the numbers my husband's pulling, which is why he said no more at our last ones. He's like, I'm going to be 70 before our house has less kids. So that's why we're not even going to be empty nesters. We're just going to have a smaller nest. That's our goal. We're shooting for the smaller nest.
Okay, well, I know why I do this stuff, right? I have a purpose in life. I was put here for a reason. I know why I do the crazy stuff that I do. I know why I'm staring down like retirement age may come before the last kid leaves the house. I understand why I'm in that place. Why do you do it?
Oh, it came down to very much that purpose element. I never really walked through the life of foster care and adoption. Nobody in my family had ever done it, any of that other stuff. It was a whole new world. And so when I went to work for the state, it was a whole nother window of a world. And there were so many changes, and it was so heartbreaking. And to be able to watch and to see this, I mean, because I was actually still in the thick of things as a caseworker when I adopted my oldest daughter. And that caused a whole lot of red tape and burned and, feathers up on end, because you're not supposed to do that. And I was going, because I also happened to be 6 months pregnant at the time, which I'm sure made my sanity look even better. That
Yes.
this woman is in her early 20s. She has a 2-year-old and she's 6 months pregnant. She's off her rocker. She has lost it. Because this kiddo, my oldest daughter, she was a handful. She was 10 and she'd been in 10 different placements by the time she came to us. And they said, she's lost it. And I said, no, this is something that needs to be done. And if nobody else is willing to do it, I can do this and I need to do this. And so we went on the foster care journey with my daughter. And after she was killed in a domestic violence situation with a teenage boyfriend, which is a whole nother yucky mess. And we did some healing despite knowing that it would probably be easier to not get on the road again. My husband and I, it's like, okay, something in my heart said, okay, you got to do a sibling group. Your life is quiet. Your life is peaceful. You're still going through all this grief stuff, but you can handle it. Let's try it again. And so we got foster care licensed. I was a clinician at the time. And so I didn't have any conflicts going on in that way. And we got on the roller coaster again.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, when we lost our daughter, it was to a nasty disease. And that's one of those things nobody expects to happen. But once it began, it was a 9-month journey. We knew things did not look good all the way through it. And at one point we were pretty certain which way we were headed. I can only imagine that when you step into something like that with a domestic abuse situation, that you didn't have a whole lot of lead up to that.
No, we did not. And I mean, she was still young. She was 15. He was not quite 15. And so it was super young and it was messy. And it really it was one of the hardest parts in getting back into foster care, because before, when we went into, when my ex-husband and I had gone into foster care, we thought our worst case scenarios we would have you'd get a pregnant teenager or maybe some shoplifting charges. This was our funnel of this is as bad as it gets, is that you might get a pregnant teenager or some shoplifting charges. That was what we imagined was our worst case scenario. We had no idea that this could happen. And again, it's not limited to foster care or adoption kids. Unfortunately, domestic violence is a problem in lots of ages all over the world, but we hadn't even imagined that would hit our radar, and it did. And you have to work through it.
Yeah. That one I think would require a lot of work for me not to end up just the anger alone. And I don't know about your husband, but as a man, as a dad, there's that protective piece that comes in, right? And I'm just thinking out loud that would lead me down a whole lot of angry, rageful type thought processes. And for you, I can't even imagine what that's like for you. How did you walk through that? How did you begin to heal your own self after you lost her? Because that's important.
It was hard, and the anger was definitely there. My husband was angry, and he very much did not want to meet with anybody, or was afraid that. And my ex-husband was equally. The anger was intense. because there was a process before because they didn't know who it was. And it was a yucky mess, Dateline mess. We even did a Dateline and other things with it. It was a Dateline mess. And once it finally got to the point of the criminal process and they knew and they pursued it, I had expected to be angry. And when we walked in and I saw him for the first time since the process, I was just so sad. And I think one of the things that I did in my process that was different, because I'm a kid raised in the 90s, true crime junkie. My dad we did Saturday Night Cops, America's Most Wanted. That was my childhood. So it was true crime before true crime what it is right now. And so I had to very intentionally go, I am not here to solve this. I am not going to try to solve this because emotionally it's not going to happen. I'm going to be invested with the police and work with them, but I have kids I need to take care of and I cannot get lost down that rabbit hole. And so I had to come to a sense of resolution, because it was a couple of years before we even got to the arrest and the trial of I am not going to let my healing be contingent upon some arbitrary law enforcement court system. The phrase that I used then and I use now is I wasn't willing to lose anything else. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, nope, I'm not losing anything else. And so I did a lot of internal work. I went to a therapist who, while is probably a great person, was a not so great therapist for my situation. Don't take a person who's just graduated with their master's degree and have them read out loud in therapy. It really pissed me off. I'm like, yes. This is not helpful. You're not getting this here. And so I quit. And then eventually a couple of years later, actually, after we had our 3 kids that we were fostering, that we've since adopted, come to live with us, it brought up so much more of my grief again, because our youngest had some significant attachment issues. And there was just so much pain, because I still remember it. I was at the state fair. We'd taken all of our kids. It was a family tradition. We went every year. And my youngest was just having meltdown in a public place, like our kids do when there's too much and they're acting out and it's just big and you are just trying to hold it together. And this lovely gentleman who knew things weren't quite right, and a foster adoptive parent himself, that just total stranger, came up and he says, I know it's hard, but they're so worth it. And he showed me this picture of his adopted daughter that had grown up and the happy ever after. And in a theory, that should have made me feel really good. That yes, there's these happy ever afters and I know they exist. And I didn't say anything, but all that felt like to me was a sucker punch to the gut of, that is not the end story of the last story I was a part of. And so all of my grief had come up, and it was just battling against my kiddos and the grief that they were going through. And so I talked to my kids' therapist, and I said, I need a therapist who's good with therapists. I don't need any BS, read me this grief stages crap. I can do that. And so I worked with a wonderful lady. She actually helped me with some hypnosis therapy. And I found out my meanings, my deeper roots of why was I having trouble letting go of this, so that I could be a better parent to my kids, and that their stuff was no longer creating the fire and gasoline dance that I didn't think still was under there.
You know, when we first started looking at therapists, I'm just going to suggest that it took a couple tries to find the right guy for us. And I honestly never expected that I would find a guy that would be the right person for my wife, because that's not what she tends to connect with. And it was a friend of mine who I knew had been through some stuff. And I said, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Do you have any he said, I've got the greatest guy in the world. He said he's kind of comes off strange at first, because if you remember Back to the Future, Marty McFly's dad, he reminds me of Marty McFly's dad, except he drops the F-bomb once in a while. And I'm like, okay, that's weird enough. I'll try. And, finding someone, I forget, Dr. Tom is, I want to say he's in his 60s at this point, early 60s. And he's seen some life. He's had some of his own trauma. And so when we went to talk with him, he was the guy we needed to talk to. It was just so valuable. This is a guy with a PhD and lots of life experience. And that was the guy we needed, because once you've been through the bigger things, through a child loss, you need somebody who's more than a couple years out of school, because everybody's got to be a couple years out of school if they're going to be on that journey. They got to get through that. There's a lot of places where that's useful. But in the big stuff, sometimes you just not only have to find somebody who has what you need in terms of education and experience, but personality too.
Absolutely.
And so, that's been huge on our journey. Huge, just finding that right therapist to talk to on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Because, and it is so different. And I tell my clients this, that I work with in private practice. I said, if we are not a fit, if we are not a match, that's okay. We don't need to pretend. We don't need to fake it. This is not your doctor where you're going in for your average physical once a year and they're just checking your blood. This is a person that you need to feel comfortable sharing your deepest, darkest soul. Otherwise, it is a waste of your time as a client, and the therapist is not going to be able to help you. And I'll be honest, as a therapist, it feels awful not being able to help somebody. It's not an enjoyable experience for a therapist either. And so I'm very direct and open with my clients, and I'm a very direct. I mean, they say therapists make the worst patients, but when I've worked before, and I'm very direct to whether it's working or it's not. And I'm not gonna, I have too much life. I have too many things that are valuable and important to me. And that I have learned includes myself. And I very much of an advocate of find who fits with you. Because therapy is a beautiful process when you find the right connection. And if you have not had a great process, the odds are you just haven't found the right connection.
Yeah. Because therapists are a whole different breed of humans in and of themselves. I have a friend of mine who's married to a therapist. And we have some interesting conversations because, I met Vaughn through a dad's group that I'm in. And Vaughn's a great dude, and he's married to a therapist. And as we talk through a lot of these different skill sets that guys are looking to gain, just learning how to communicate better and create better relational connections and things like that. And I'm like, dude, I'm just super curious. Like, what does that look like in your house? Because most of these guys, they can go home and take some of this stuff home to their family, to their wife, and use some of these skill sets, and it's beneficial and helpful. But I know that if your wife is any good at all as a therapist, she probably sees the mechanics of what's going on. And she's thinking, what are you trying to do? So it's a whole different aspect. And I'm just curious, as far as, because you guys have been through so much together on your own, and, you live vicariously through a lot of trauma of patients, I'm certain, whether you try to do it or not, it's part of your life experience. How's that affected your marriage and your relationship with your husband and your kids as well?
My husband is a very special guy. He's pretty amazing. He and I connected. We've been together 13 years. We've been married 12 years this year. And we are both fiercely independent and stubborn, which is a pro and a con. He, in general, hates the world of therapy. He hates therapists. He thinks we're all nuts. He's your veteran, your PTSD veteran, because the services that came to him made him believe that therapists are all a waste because it didn't work for him, because the ones that he saw were not a good fit for him. But as a couple, we're very direct with each other and it can be really helpful. And over the last 13 years, we worked to figure it out. And there are times when I take up a lot of space in a relationship. I know it seems very shy, and I'm sure I'm a super shy, quiet person, but I take up a lot of space in a relationship. And sometimes my sweet, I don't want to rock the boat husband says, all right, whatever you need, dear. And other times he's just open. And so in doing that, we learn a lot about what we share with each other and what we need to have other resources to share. I'm a very big advocate, especially for therapist spouses. You got to have people other than your partner, because some of the stuff I hear would be upsetting and overwhelming to my husband. And I work in private practice now versus a community practice where I'd have coworkers and supervisors or supervisees. And so I am thankful that my two best girlfriends are from grad school. So they also happen to be therapists. And we have our own version of group therapy of, all right, here's our non-identifiable stuff that I need to process and get out of my head. And so I definitely say that and advocate for that. You got to have your own support group. And my partner, my husband, is absolutely one of them. But there's stuff that I have to keep that separate, not because he's not a wonderful, amazing man, but because being on the therapist end of things, you hold space for a lot of people's dark places. And not everybody is made up to hold space in that same way, because you just don't have to, or you don't have enough space. And so you find the people that hold space. In my case, I'm blessed with other friends who are therapists who know how to hold the space, but not hold on to the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you use an interesting phrase there, because that's one of the things that when we first started this podcast journey, one of the things we said was we wanted to hold space for people to be able to share their stories in as non-judgmental of a place as they can, with as much anonymity as they need, because some people don't want you to know who they are. Some people had a terrible experience with a foster family when they were a kid. Maybe there was some sort of physical or sexual abuse, and they don't want a former foster family hearing them talk about it. And so, they could be Veronica or they could be Susan. And we hold that space to be able to come in and tell a story as anonymously or not as you need to, because, that's a valuable thing that I found, is just being able to speak out your truth into this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. People don't understand each other's trauma. And until you've taken the time to sit and listen without judging it, without arguing it, and just sit and listen to someone tell how their life has been changed, it's a very lonely world if you can't share that experience with anyone else.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I deeply believe and I harp on is people are so much more comfortable being afraid than they are being sad. We're encouraged to be afraid. And when we hear other people's trauma, it brings up our fear and all these other things. And it just feels so much easier to be scared than to be sad. And unfortunately, if we stay scared, it really ruins our relationships. If I were to focus on all the fear of all the different things that could happen to my kids or my husband or myself, I don't know that I would make it.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here trying to process through that thought, and being more comfortable being scared than sad. Mm-hmm. As a man, and I'm just going to, kind of talking about the masculine versus feminine energies here. I think when you're in your masculine, that is 100% true. I can deal with afraid, because all I have to do is rouse my anger a bit when I'm afraid, to feel like I have some power or agency in the world.
Yep.
And you look at the amount of men in this world who struggle with anger.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. I know that the dad's group I'm in, the guy who runs it, Larry Heigner, he has a patience course. And it's all about understanding how to deal with some of your own anger and have patience with your family. And that has been one of his most popular courses, is because people don't understand how to get through their own anger.
Yeah. It feels more comfortable, and women get angry too. Women do also have a tendency, for women, it can show up a lot more like anxiety and depression, and men can struggle from anxiety and depression as well. But there's so much of that is just because we're avoiding feeling sad, because feeling sad, I'll put it out there. Feeling sad sucks. Feeling sad is lonely and can be isolating and heartbreaking, and we don't like it. And there is a huge fear that comes up with our sadness. Grief has fear. Fear is the stage that they didn't tell you was in those stages of grief. Fear is like layered on there, like that thick buttercream frosting. And it tells you about all of the things that you might lose, or all of the things that might be coming next. And so, of course, sadness feels overwhelming and intense and unavoidable. And then we're afraid about all these other times we're going to be sad. And we feel like it's not ever going to end, that this is a permanent state of being. When in truth, that's not the sadness, that's the fear. And so separating that fear and that sadness of what am I afraid of and what am I actually grieving? Because we get in this position. I know as a parent, I fall in that a lot of, am I grieving what is actually going on? What is actually making me sad right now? Or am I grieving all of the things in the future that I'm afraid are going to happen? And I wonder why I feel overwhelmed. When we get so upset that our kid, I mean, my darling, my youngest daughter, she's almost 13, and she hates to do the dishes. You would think I had asked her to do the worst, awful, kill her job in the world, hates to do the dishes. And in my less great mom mode, definitely not therapist mode, but in my less great mom mode, I start to catapult. Well, she doesn't do the dishes, she's never going to make it. She's not going to be productive. She's never going to get a job. She's either never going to move out, or then she's going to be homeless. And then she's going to get into this abusive relationship and blah, 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 blah. Kid just doesn't want to do the dishes.
But I think, I don't know how well planned out that whole thought was, but the way that you ended that, that it's going to lead her into an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And that
my stuff, still shows up.
Right back. Yeah. And I know that's something that Amanda and I deal with still to this day is, once you've experienced child loss, like that fear continues to show up in places that you don't.
Oh, absolutely.
And you don't even necessarily see it that way, maybe not consciously, but it's there.
It is constant. It is because it's one of those things when you go through grief, whether it be child loss, whether it be divorce, whether it be loss of a close friend or something else like that, you have broken that bubble of naivety that it can't happen and that it can't happen to you. Because very well it can happen, and it can happen to you, and it did happen to you. And so there's no magic, beautiful wand that says, well, you're only going to be given so many struggles in life. Here's your short stick. You've already gotten it. You can't get it again. There's no guarantee. There's no magic. All right, you've already struggled through something really painful. You've met your cap. No more life struggles for you. It doesn't work that way. We are not the fortune tellers of saying no bad, scary things will ever happen to us or happen to the people that we love again. And we can be scared, which is what a lot of people feel, because it is very genuinely scary. Or we can go, well, it's a risk that I got to take.
I don't like that one, though.
Most of us don't.
I don't like that one bit, because what you're saying is 100% right. It's 100% right. And it's, I guess once you've walked that journey, it's easier to see it, I think, because we've walked that journey, and to see how sometimes it comes back and shows itself time and again, and we're faced with the same struggle a million more times, even though it would never have been that way had you not been through that one experience. You would probably have never had those responses that you do now, and they seem so much more rational than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, I wouldn't have my other 5 children if I hadn't have lost my daughter. Not that it makes me grateful for losing my daughter. I am grateful for my experiences since then. That doesn't ever have to make me grateful for losing my daughter. But I can see that there are other things that have come into my life that might not have come into my life if I hadn't lost her.
Yeah. It's one of the lessons I've learned is that I think our job is to take the pain we're handed and create something beautiful out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what a job that is.
It's an important job, but a messy job.
Yeah. You might start with a ginormous steaming pile of manure dumped into the middle of your life, and what am I ever going to do with all this? And I mean, you can use that manure to create a beautiful garden. There's a lot of things you can do, but
But in the beginning stage, when it's smelly and yucky and gross and you're tired and you don't feel good and everybody else is telling you, it's okay, you can't do this, just stop now, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you may have walked a few of the same roads, Veronica, as what Amanda and I have. So it's glad to know we're not the only ones who have been a little insane on this journey and still continue to press on.
That's right.
You know, because honestly, the loss of our oldest daughter, that happened as our very first two foster kids. The very first placement we had was with us at that time. And that's where we were. We were in the middle of that. And so who knows how that would have gone otherwise, but we are where we're at. And, you know, we've talked a lot on the foster parent side today and the things that we as foster parents deal with. And I'm just curious because, you know, I'm just going to assume you're probably lying a little bit like my wife does whenever she says, I have this amazing husband over here. And I'm like, no, baby, you got me. You got me. But keeping that relationship healthy. What's been some of the skill sets that has been vital to you, just keeping a marriage that's healthy and strong and willing to deal with the hard stuff and still keep moving?
We very much intentionally have to figure out how to have time as an adult couple. I mean, we've got a lot of kids, and especially when you add young kids, even mouthy teenagers, there's plenty of things that we can do. And there are plenty of times when we would make mistakes and we'd go out for an adult thing or an adult date night, and all we do is whine about the children. And that was not really a bonding experience. It is really not the relationship building experience. And so we have to, and it is still 100% work. It's good work. And there are definitely lots of benefits to it, but we're not talking about the kids. What's our other dreams? What are the things we do? What are the things we want to do for fun? What do we like about each other? And very intentionally practicing it. And there are times when we fall short. There are times when our relationship may not be at the top of its game because we are exhausted and we have been working with the real life of we both have to work. And so so we can pay and feed for the house and the children and the dogs and the what have you, where there's not a lot left for each other. And in those times, our marriage gets a little rocky. And so we've been there and we very intentionally have to figure out, okay, what does that look like? And we do it where there's less time involved. And we've learned out how to do it in times where there's little to no money involved, because when you get the kid that needs braces, or when there's a gap, or when you have to replace a water heater, or any of those millions of things that come to where we do not have to sacrifice our relationship based on how much time we have or how much money we have, because there's always something else that's wanting our time and our money. Even if we lock ourselves downstairs in the basement and we will watch a movie on one of the various streaming devices that we've got, and that's our date night. Just the little tiny things to where we go, okay, we are a human, we're in this together, we're not just mom and dad, and allowing us to set down that mom and dad have role. I mean, it was beautiful. We aren't close to family anymore, but when we were living close to family, it was a blessing to be able to have our kids go to grandma's house or have grandma come, and we would sneak away. And we don't get to do that as often as we used to, but having whatever those supports are in is huge, because being a parent all the time is hard. Being a parent to a child who has been adopted or in foster care is exhausting, because there is so much stuff that sometimes you don't even know until you're further down the road. And so parenting is hard enough, but I definitely say when we have kids that we haven't been with along the way, or who have, even if we've been there from when they were babies, they have DNA and genes, and it is an adjustment. Having a baby does not make that magically easier. I mean, my youngest were 1 and 2 when they came to live with me. that is not the same experience as having when my kids were that age. It's not the same. It doesn't mean I don't love them, because I absolutely am crazy about my kids, but they are not mini me's. They have their own experience. They have their own genes. They have their own way their body processes things. Their
own generational traumas that tend to like to show up at your house.
Very much so. They have stuff that you're like, and you're always going, okay, how much of this is age appropriate and how much of this is from foster and adoption? And that's the other gap that we fall into as foster and adoptive parents, because we definitely don't want to feel like we're screwing it all up when these behaviors are exploding like the volcano. No. I couldn't be screwing it all up this big. And we get stuck in this debate of, well, is it because they're foster and they're adoptive kids? Or is it just because they're a kid? And sometimes being a kid is hard. And we do not always know the answer to that.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes being a kid just is hard, and it's very difficult for us to understand that and remember that sometimes when you have an 11-year-old kid who's just losing their ever-loving mind, and you haven't dealt with the preteen years yet, and you see this thing, you're like, huh? What's wrong with you, child? Stop acting like a fool. You have a great life. What are you being upset about? You need to calm down, because when you use that mentality, it always works, right?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't even work with adults. And we somehow believe that just telling someone to calm down will work with the child. Somehow we think that that's a magical phrase.
I'm glad Amanda's not here, because she would be staring holes into the side of my head right now. Because Lord knows I'd say something about just telling her to calm down. And there would be some memory of back when I was a lot less mature, also a lot more stupid, when I may have looked at a phrase like that, you just need to calm down. And that, gentlemen, if you're listening, if you're not, if you're tuned out, listen close on this one. Telling your wife to calm down, or girlfriend, or any other female in your life for that matter, is always the wrong answer.
It's not that they haven't thought about it. You're not introducing a new concept. Same thing I would say for the women and their husbands and their children. It's not that they wouldn't like to. You're not giving. This isn't multiple choice. Yeah. And so that a lot of the struggles being a parent is hard in this generation. I'm a 90s kid myself, right? Like I grew up on alternative and grunge and all that good stuff, and so being a parent in this generation is hard enough, because our parents obviously did not understand what it was like to be a teenager when we were that age. And in this world, I mean, my God, if you can keep up with the different social media as a construct was something we had to kind of figure out as the second generation learners there, figuring out as our kids were 2-3 steps ahead of us. And now we look at it and I'm like, I can't keep up with them. I know.
Snapchat is the last one that I really know much about at all. Ooh. And I can't figure out how to use that stupid thing. There's TikTok, and we have a TikTok account. If you look up, I think we're Foster Care Nation is the handle on there. I don't really remember. I try and figure this out, and I'm like, y'all have some weird stuff. I can barely keep up with it, let alone figure out how to keep them safe amongst all that.
Yeah, that's definitely scary. We are definitely more of the overprotective parents of, you are not entitled to a cell phone unless you are responsible with it. I mean, even my beautiful 19-year-old son at college, he has unlimited options, but he still has the tracking app. So I'm like, yes, you may be 8 hours away from me, but if you're in an accident, I want to be able to find your car, and I want to be able to do this. And when you are graduated from high school, we understand that you might make choices we may not agree with, and that you may do that before you graduate from high school. But we're very much you're not going to benefit. You are not going to die if you do not have a Snapchat, or if you do not have a TikTok channel, or if you're not allowed on Facebook, or this and that and the other. Yes, your friends may have it, but I promise you, you will make it. And if you want options, to have other options, then you're going to make good choices. And the second that you don't, we're going to take that off again, because some of the choices that you make are going to have way bigger consequences than you ever imagine.
And somehow or another, they can't always hear that. I created a Snapchat account once because I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vee. he's a big marketing guy, and I saw something he'd put out about how, you needed to be on Snapchat. Snapchat marketing is a new place to be. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and see if I can figure this out. Now, number one, I never figured it out. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm too dumb. Maybe I just can't be pushed into, chasing down secret messages from random people, and I can't keep up with that. And so that's why it didn't really work for me. But I had our very first Snapchat account that I created a couple of years ago. It was right around the beginning of our podcast. And I forget the name that I'd used, because don't worry, the handle's been deleted. The account's gone, so you won't find it. But it was something like foster care journey or something like that. And do you know, it took me a full 24 hours of having that particular app on my phone before I started getting pictures of penises sent to me just randomly. And I'm like, whoa, hang on. Like random pictures like that are not appropriate anywhere to strangers. But you chose an account that has the word foster care in the title to send that to.
People do the most stupid things because they think they're anonymous between apps and the internet, and they're just cruel and dumb. And I again, it makes me feel super old. and I'm going to be 40, so I don't officially count that as old yet. But I'm just like, what are you thinking? And so I'm like, no, I do not have the time and the energy for this. We're not doing this. I mean, I have 7 boys, and I am very open with that. Do I have 7 boys? Yes, I'm thinking it's 7.
I know the struggle.
I have a lot of boys, and I am very clear. I've given them all the embarrassing conversation, the mom conversation. No girl wants to see a picture of your penis. Don't send it to them unless they have specifically requested it. Even then, say no, because it means she's just going to show it to her friends and make fun of you. Do not ever take a picture there. It's not necessary. It will get you nowhere. I said, just don't.
And on top of that, depending on your age and her age, it can also easily be called child pornography and put you at legal risk that you really don't want to have to go show that part of your body to your cellmate either.
Yeah, I've had that conversation too. I said, you do know that you are still a minor, and all those other, the mom conversations that my parents didn't have to have with me, because we didn't have camera phones. We didn't have cell phones because they were $1 billion, and you didn't have any of those options. And now it's ridiculous. And so people make silly choices just because they can, not because they should.
Yeah, that's a lesson I wish we could teach the kids a little bit earlier, but I think we got to wait until that frontal lobe fully develops before they start to actually hear that and understand it. That may be the whole reason why most of our wars are fought by 18-year-old boys. Because once you get to a certain age, you think, I don't know if that's a long way away from home. I've eaten like MREs. They're not that good. I don't know that I want to go somewhere else and have people shooting at me. It just doesn't sound like the sort of thing I want to volunteer for. It sounds like a horrible idea, but I was there at a young age, and, in my, around 20 years old. And yeah, the most of the guys who join up for that stuff, we look back and we go, yeah, we were pretty stupid as a group. We were generally speaking very, very stupid.
We're very clear. My 16-year-old's in the ROTC, and he's looking at a military life, and we are very open. We're like, this is your life. This is your choice. There's some very honorable things about the military and things like that, because I have 3 branches of military and my family members, but we are also, here are all the reasons why you shouldn't join the military. If you're doing it for college, go get a student loan, go do something else. This is not the route for college.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for all these other things, we're like, here's what's really going on. This is what it's going to be like. And if you're okay with that, there are great benefits and skills and opportunities, but don't do it for the commercial. Because it's not going to be the commercial for you. So find out what really fits for you and do something that, because, we love our kids and we want them to be safe, and we want them to have the best information and to make the best choice possible.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw a plug in here. If anybody has a kid who's looking at going into the military, look at the Air Force. Just look at the Air Force. I was in the Army, and for some time I was stationed in the Army on an Air Force base, and I looked around and went, holy crap, these guys got it made. when the Air Force, the airmen came to stay on Army bases, they got paid extra money for separate rations because the Army food was considered substandard. Yes, the Air Force has the cool stuff and they have the cool toys, and yeah, go to the Air Force thing if you have to. I mean, I love my Marines out there, and you know, I always tease them a little bit and ask them what their favorite flavor crayon is, and that sort of, because that's how we talk, right? The Army, we tease the Air Force and the Marines and the Navy, and they poke fun at us. But yeah, when I'm looking at that with my kids, my own son, he decided to join the Army, and I was like, dude, okay, if you're not going to listen to anything else I say, at least listen to this. When you go in, and before you go in, when you're selecting that job, go do something that's going to serve you when you get out. And today he is an LPN and owes exactly $0 in student loans. And what he has left on the education stuff, I think the cost for him to get his RN would be under $2,000.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculously cheap for the money that they, and right now in a, I don't know if we're in a COVID world or post-COVID, I don't know exactly what we want to call this era of time, but nursing, like those folks are getting paid bank.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a career choice. He stepped into the right one at the right time. So just trying to get these kids through these, especially the kids that we have come through our home through the trauma stories. Because let's be real honest, if you go off to the military, some of that stuff and jobs in general can be this way. You're going to step into some places that are really hard.
Yes.
Be prepared.
I would definitely say work out your trauma story before you join the military, because they're going to push all your beautiful buttons.
Yeah, that's super important. Well, Veronica, I am so glad you came to talk to me today. And I love a lot of the advice you gave that's going to be helpful for foster parents looking back across our own marriages and relationships. That's some of the most beneficial things that nobody ever told us about when we started this. You know, it maybe it's part of some of the training now, but it wasn't when we went through, and we've had to struggle through a lot of that stuff in our own time, in our own difficult ways. So any way that we can help foster parents, especially, build those marriages, have better connections, and then be better parents to biological, foster, or even just kinship family members, that allows us to really treat the kids better, give them what they need, and model a relationship that we can change the generations is just as amazingly helpful as we can be. So thank you so much for your advice and your story and your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Veronica's story. Now take her knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. Don't forget, we have a Patreon account where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. Visit patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything are in the show notes in your podcast player or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys are cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.